Next item, please.
Next item is union leadership commentary. This new section of the board meeting is being added to further enhance the already strong commitment and longtime partnership between district administration and all bargaining units. Both instructional and non-instructional union members serve on a wide variety of standing and ad hoc committees that drive the work and decision-making in the Dearborn Public Schools. In addition, administration meets monthly with the leadership teams of all unions, as well as a group meeting with union presidents. These meetings are not required, but are an extension of the collaborative partnership that has long existed in the Dearborn Public Schools. This new section will further enhance the commitment to valuing all suggestions, views, and opinions brought forth by all staff members in the district. And I'll just skip directly to see where we have someone. Okay, so who we have here tonight with us is from the Dearborn Federations of Teachers, DFT, Miss Kathi Martin.
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Theater people. It's nice to have support from everywhere. I'm here tonight to talk about building conditions. This has been an issue for a long time. I understand that having the bond fail several years ago did have a negative impact on how, buildings and infrastructure is being handled in the district. However, even if we pass a bond today, some of these building conditions won't be addressed for years to come. And we have students right now learning in classrooms that are 60 degrees. Now, maybe they're in and out of that room, for an hour, but teachers are in there teaching for 8 hours. We have actually sitting here just now, I got an email from a teacher at one of the high schools who says her room is basically an inferno and there are no windows in that room. And she's put in work orders, but the district now contracts out to just 2 companies and they're understaffed and she has to wait who knows how long. So I don't know what the details are. But these kids are in and out of, in that classroom, and it's making it hard for her to teach and hard for the kids to learn. We have mold issues in the district. We have rodent issues, and these things would definitely be resolved with the bond. However, they need to be taken care of now, not when a bond passes. So I really hope that we're able to look at each individual building and figure out which ones can be resolved right now. I don't think anyone here wants their student learning in a classroom where black mold has been found, and we're not clear as to whether it's been cleared out or not. And to ask teachers to spend 8 hours a day in those rooms, we have teachers right now who are having health issues, whose doctors are telling them, you need to quit your job because it's an unsafe environment for you because of your health. So I mean, the money should be found somewhere because this is the health of our students and our staff. So I hope we can focus on that.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Thanks.
I do have a question.
Do you have a question for Ms. Martin?
Yeah.
Trustee Adami, go ahead.
Sorry. When we talk about the different conditions or issues, are they reported? And this is a question to Dr. Maleko, do we have a list of issues that, whether it's mold, whether it's any type of issues, is there a list of items that's been reported, is I guess what I'm saying?
I have an incomplete list. I have a list of the people who've reached out to me. I don't know at the district level, though.
So safety is our top priority, and obviously we want to address issues. So if you have some specifics, if you send it to me and to Mark Andrews, we will get on top of it. We do have a protocol, depending on what it is, because there were different things mentioned here, that we would look into it, address it, and bring in contractors. There's a lot of different things. Like I know, for example, in one of the schools, the roof needs to be replaced, or a portion of it, so there was water leakage, so they addressed it. I think the teacher had to move for a certain point in time, just as one example. But I appreciate the collaboration with Ms. Martin. If you could send us those things. There are things, though, when I go to like chatting events and I'm saying like a lot of things that are requests that are made, for example, I was telling people this example, there's things that we probably should replace, but what we're doing is prioritizing, boilers and heating and electrical and things that you have to, like you would in your home, versus like requests for bleachers and new things that we probably should have, but we just don't have the funding for. And we did talk about, how we're funding some things today in the Finance Committee meeting. But if you could send me a list, then obviously we'll look into it. I know if there's ever mold or some other specific safety issue, Danielle's on top of it. We bring in consultants, we bring in contractors, we look to it, and we make sure we're in compliance with all the, the state and federal rules and, to make sure people are safe. But I can understand their concerns, and I would just say this is another reason why we are also talking about a potential bond in the future, because we do not have infrastructure funding from the state, as was discussed in the Finance Committee, or the federal government. So we need to find another way to do it. And while a bond may be long-term, it's something that we need to do, now for the future. But in the interim, I know Mr. Wall and his team, and we discussed it today, they find ways to use our general, all we have now is our general fund, which most of it does go, for the people that work in our district. But I do know that Mr. Wall is always bringing, what can we put on and put more money into infrastructure as well. So I appreciate you bringing these forward, and we will definitely, and the collaboration, we always are trying to work together. And of course, we want students and staff to make sure safety is number one.
I just want to add to that, it's when we say there's issues, I would prefer there's a reportable mechanism, so we could track them. And then I agree with you, the bond is, for major infrastructure, but if there is any safety issue, mold, or anything like that, that's where they get prioritized. But if there's a reporting a way for teachers to report issues, and it gets to the...
Say something, see something, say something.
There is a ticketing system, I
Spreadsheet.
believe. Yeah.
What was that?
We can have Mrs. Zia come and address some of the concerns as far as addressing
Good evening,
somebody
everyone.
reports an issue in infrastructure.
So as far as reporting mechanism, we do have an air quality complaint form, and we use that for anybody in Dearborn schools can fill this form out. It gets reported through the engineers, and then we take a look at it. And if it's something that needs to be tested, so if it's something like mold or something that just smells in the air that the teacher would report, we do have an environmental consulting company that comes out, and they do testing, and they give us recommendations. And then we follow up and make sure that the recommendations that were given are followed. And if the room needs to be vacated while that work is being done, then we ask the teacher to relocate. We work with the school to relocate the teacher. And then once the room is safe to be reoccupied, we make sure that the teacher can go back inside of the classroom. So we do have all of those mechanisms in place. It's just that I do want to say one thing too about mold. So the EPA and the state do not have a mold threshold. And the reason for this is because mold is forever changing. Mold will grow when it's hotter outside. It gets less active when it's colder in a place or a space. And so like if I were to test my home today, it would come back positive for mold, guaranteed. And that's the reason that there is no threshold, because mold levels are continuously changing. So you could test something for mold today, temperatures change, environment changes, and then the test for mold tomorrow would be different. So we just try to work with our buildings and trades guys and operations and the testing company to just make sure that we look at each situation and try to clean up as much as we can.
So when mold is discovered, we do address it immediately.
Yes, we get it tested, and then the environmental company gives us recommendations. We make sure that the recommendations that we're given are followed through and try to remediate the issues.
Trustee Watts.
So I think part of this was already kind of discussed. I was just thinking, if I were a teacher and you were saying that there is a reporting system, is this reporting system electronic or is it a paper reporting system?
It's electronic and paper.
Okay, so
You can do either one.
So they can do both?
Yes, some people prefer to email it to us. Some people prefer to send it inter-school mail.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
it could be
it's not
done
like
either
we're
way.
reporting it up to the principal and then then the principal, we're waiting for them to.
It usually goes through the engineer.
Okay, so go straight to the engineer. So it's,
Normally, some teachers like to fill it out themselves and send it to me.
okay.
And we don't want to tell them that they have to go through somebody. It's fine. If I get it from the engineer, we take a look at it. If I get it directly from the teacher, we take a look at it. If I get it, sometimes I'll get it directly from the principal.
So, for instance, if I had like a classroom that was extremely hot, so I went on my app or on the form and I said, it's really, it's got so hot in here, there's no windows. What would be then the turnaround until I would hear back from somebody saying, I acknowledge this and I'm sending somebody out?
Okay, heating and cooling,
Yes.
not my thing.
Okay.
I'm going to call up Mark Andrews.
I'm just thinking, what would the turnaround be so that they would be able to?
Yeah, so it's
like-
normally the engineer would start a ticket for something like that, and then they'd get the HVAC guys out. If it's something that they can take care of right away, they do.
Okay.
Mark?
Correct. So good evening. So yeah, we have a separate work order system for heating and cooling issues and other building issues. And we would direct those to the building engineer. And we always like to have the building administration a part of those conversations so they know what's going on in the building as well. I would like to add to what Ms. Elzayat added, the form we use is recommended by the EPA. So it's a Google Doc and it can be either done electronically or printed and done by hand. But it is a document that the EPA suggests to use.
Okay, so it sounds like the teachers would have this tool that they could put in a work order, and what would be the turnaround until they would?
So every year, Trustee Watts, maybe even twice a year, I send out classroom tips and guidelines, and then that Google Doc that goes out to the entire district, and that Google Doc, the air quality complaint form, is actually linked in that document. So it's shared with staff about twice a year.
Okay, so my question would be, like, in the morning, it's ungodly hot in my classroom.
Turnaround.
And if I put in that request, would I be able to get some sort of reprieve or fans or something very shortly to start helping with the temperature control?
So a lot of options. One, if there's windows, that'd be something that the building could look at. Again, we like to have the building administration involved because,
Yes.
There's times where our HVAC technicians, we have 3, I'm going to plug in. We'd like to hire more in the future, but we understand right now we can't. So they could be overwhelmed and you do it by a priority, right? So, or first come, first serve. But, we try to get to them within, at least look at them within the same day. But as far as resolving them, it can depend on what parts are needed, what's the cause of it. So a lot of times with our older buildings, there's lead times. It can be a couple weeks to get the proper parts. That's why we like to work with the building administrator and see if we can relocate them even for a classroom that's too warm.
Okay.
Trustee Barry, and then we'll
Yes,
get to you.
Martin brings some issues that we've heard about before. But I want to concentrate, I want to make a comment. I don't think anybody's qualified to look at something and call it black mold. I mean, this is just, from my industry, I know that for a fact. But what I'd like to see is you communicate with Ms. Elzayat or Dr. Maleko or both, what buildings this is at, and let's get it inspected, because black mold is very serious. And to allege out there on this world that, we have black mold in our buildings, it's alleged,
It came from a report.
well, okay, it came from a report, but we just need to there's some responsibility on us here not to put that out there that there's black mold, because that's some very serious stuff. Let's just get to this, please, Dr. Maleko. Thank you.
Trustee Petlicoff?
I think what Trustee Aljami was kind of alluding to, do we have any kind of spreadsheet, so to speak, of what's going on in every building when these kinds of work orders and/or air quality complaints, so that there's like a master list that somebody can look at, and maybe, just like we've done in the past for where we're at with schedules of construction projects, and what, could we have something that somebody could look at and track and say, okay, this is where you're at with this building, this room, this issue, kind of thing, so that it can be followed a little more transparently?
So with the building issues outside of the air quality, the work order system, you can run a report to see that's why we're very strict about making sure engineers submit a work order. So that's in the system and it can always be tracked about which room, when it's been done, and what the problems were.
When it was logged in?
Correct.
And how, and
Correct.
where it's at?
And Mr. Wells,
Okay.
we're moving to another system, electronic system, for when we do kind of a bigger projects. We can track what infrastructure improvements have been made in the district as well.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Trustee Zard?
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So there is like some central system of work orders, tickets, whatever. Who submits those? So, in other words, can a teacher directly submit a work order or a ticket, or does it have to go to someone in the school first who then submits it?
So the building engineers, some buildings, our middle schools and our high schools have 2 building engineers. Our small elementary schools only have 1 elementary, unless you're at like Henry Ford Elementary. So the building engineer are the ones that are responsible for submitting a work order.
Okay, so how does it work before that? So I'm a teacher in the
report to the
classroom.
engineer.
I, write an email to the engineer, I talk to the engineer or whatever, and then the engineer submits the work order?
So we leave it up for the building administrator for each building to make the rules on how to report it. Most of them like to keep it through an email. It can be done verbally, really. So, but email is what a lot of administrators prefer. So that it can be recorded as well that way.
Why don't teachers directly submit a ticket or a work order?
It's a complicated system, and then so the person that has to do it, we want to make sure that it's done properly and it goes to the right people.
Can't we have I mean, the reason I'm asking is just like, so somehow we can, maybe one day track, okay, this many requests came in, instead of there being some informal system before it gets to the engineer. Maybe there can be a system where a teacher or someone in the building submits something through the system and then it gets approved by the engineer, whatever, since it's a complicated system.
Right.
I'm sure the teachers can figure it out though. And so, just so that we really know, so we have metrics, right? So we can hold everybody accountable at every step. Also, to protect against people making that way, if people are making too many requests, to make too many silly requests, whatever. But just so that there is some way to track everything from the beginning seems.
You were hitting it a little bit there, why we like the building engineer, because a lot of times it's something that can be small and because part of their job responsibility is to take care of problems in the building. So that's one of the reasons why we like to direct it to the building engineer. So first, they're aware of the issue, so things aren't being submitted without them aware of it. Two, a lot of times they can investigate it. They all hold boiler license, so they can look into the system. Sometimes it's as easy as just making an adjustment on our buildings that are newer, that have controls are electronic. So it might just be a matter of the schedule needs to be reset. So there's a lot of reasons why we like it to go through the building engineer, so they're aware of it and they can make sure that even when our trades come out, that they can help the trades show them where the problem is and what the problem is, and already started the investigation.
No, I understand all of that. I'm just saying, maybe we have a system where something gets approved by the building engineer before it gets further, whatever. But it sounds like right now there's no formal uniform system of a complaint getting from a teacher to the engineer in the building. Is that right?
Correct. Their teachers they don't have access to, and we can look into expanding it to them for sure.
Okay. And then my other question, Kathy, is how long has all this stuff been going on in the schools?
Since I've been hired. However, things don't come to me right when it first happens.
Sure.
So usually, like the person who contacted me has gone through, like I'm only talking about today, I'm not talking about the reports I have, in the computer. She has gone through the proper channels and said that I'm basically her last resort. And I will say, when I get involved, things do get resolved. So it's not like stuff, it continuously gets pushed aside. But, for the past 2 weeks, she's had a sweltering classroom with no windows. But, I mean, we've got old buildings, so some of the stuff is, it is what it is, I've brought heaters into some of my rooms. Sometimes stuff you can figure out how to work with it, but some stuff, I can count off the buildings. But, some stuff you can work around, but other things it's just difficult. And it's hard. It's one thing for you to be struggling, but to have a whole classroom of kids who are lethargic and have their head down and you're trying to teach, it's kind of tough.
To me, this just kind of highlights how we all need to, everyone, we all need to get on the same page because these schools are these kids' homes for 8 or 10 hours a day. And so we need to make sure that we all get on the same page so that when we do submit a bond to the community, it's been well-researched, thought out, and has input from everybody so that it passes overwhelmingly. I really do believe that it'll pass overwhelmingly if we get everybody on board from the beginning. So I thank you for bringing all this up and being a voice for our teachers.
Trustee Watts?
So I think this was all great discussion as well, because I'm sure that there's probably some program out there or some way to be able to be transparent so we can see when that report's being made. But I think also as a teacher, like two things. Number one, you want to be able to say like, this is the status of what is happening and how long it's going to happen.
Right.
But the other thing is sometimes some teachers like a nice colder classroom, some like a warmer classroom. So it's also personal preference, but you also know which room is that room in the school building, and you kind of paper rock as to who gets that one. So I think everyone knows who has that one classroom in the building. But all of that said, I think that having a transparent document that people can look on there to say like, or just the email saying, this is when the part's ordered, this is how long it's going to be. It helps you then plan accordingly with your students.
Yes.
And then you can then go ahead and know like, it's going to get fixed, this is short term, and my needs are being met, so.
Trustee Al-Jahmi?
Just to piggyback on the trustees, he made a good comment. If we have a list of issues, it's easier to justify the bond because you know the different issues that's happened. But I was just going to share my experience for tracking things of this sort. Usually it's similar to a help desk system. And sometimes help desk system could handle that, which all you have to do is, make a service type of building issues. And this way you have a trackable item. You could justify it later on to say we have buildings with heating problem, ventilation, and so on. But it gives you a trackable, but I understand it has to go through the engineer because they have to assign it and create a work order. So I get that part. But there is easy ways to report those, similar to a help desk system, and they're not very expensive.
Trustee Barry?
Trustee Zar, did I hear you say that teachers can figure it out?
I think
Imagine that.
I think so, right?
But on a more serious note, we've experienced before where the engineers kind of run the building and I'll pick on Kathy here. Kathy's a troublemaker in this building. She's always pointing things out. She's always pointing out. And they sort of kind of make an executive decision on what needs to be done or not done. So I can't imagine, I don't remember the last time we disciplined an engineer or custodian for not following protocol. Somehow, there's one particular building, we had the same problem for over a decade. 2, possibly 3 different principals couldn't figure it out. So yeah, you're right. There's gotta be a process where if I'm a teacher and I send it to my building administrator or my engineer and it doesn't happen, there's gotta be somebody I can reach out to directly. So I agree with that.
I think that feedback can definitely be taken back to Dr. Maliko
Great
and his team
discussion.
in operations to discuss a way of tracking those requests.
And we'll put it on cabinet agenda for tomorrow discussion and see if there's any, with technology and things, of a workflow system that maybe we can do what you're saying, so.
Yeah, sorry, if I
Yeah,
may,
go ahead.
just to reiterate just one more time, is that the same system be from the teacher's desk, all the, so the teacher, right, and again, there can be stop measures, right? So if the engineer can stop something or go back to the, whatever. I understand that the engineer on site is the one who is obviously more, and obviously we want most of the communication to happen in the building. They're the ones that are on the ground and know what's going on. But it just seems to be, to create transparency and accountability across the board from A to Z, if the teacher can be submitting a request right away, into the same system that the engineer is going to do it to, so that everything is tracked from the beginning. So no one can ever say, hey, I didn't get a request, hey, the engineer is not listening, whatever. It just creates all transparency and accountability from the top. It just seems to make, and it would just probably solve a lot of conflicts too, I imagine.
And also I would say just our teachers have a lot on their plate to begin with, to make an easy system that takes 30,
Yes.
something that takes 30 seconds. It should not be very complicated to put it in order, so.
And I think it's a good idea. We do the same thing for field trips. It starts, the form goes, and
Yeah.
it goes to different people throughout, ends up with me. Actually, this one ends up at the board at the end, just getting the notification. So it's an example. Thank you. Good ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Martin. It's a great discussion.